Welcome to our inaugural podcast. I'm Bernadette Nugent and I'm the CEO of Amber Community. Today I'm talking to Meg Caines, Director from Polaris Lawyers. Polaris is one of our valued legal partners and they work with us to support people who have been impacted by road trauma to help us get the best possible outcomes for these people whose lives have often changed forever. So hi Meg.
Hi Ben, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming in today. We just want to have a bit of a chat to you to sort of, I guess, help people navigate their way through the landscape of personal injury law a little bit after they've been involved in a serious road incident. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Polaris?
Absolutely. Bern, I'm a director at Polaris Lawyers. I have over 12 years experience in personal injury law, and at the beginning of my career I worked exclusively in transport accidents. I work across a number of practice areas now, but transport accidents is still where I do the majority of my work. So Polaris is a boutique personal injury law, and we started 7 years ago after leaving one of Australia's large consumer law firms. The reason we started Polaris was really simple, and our mission, it's encapsulated by our mission today, the simple desire to create the most client-centric personal injury law firm in Victoria. So we see our role and the role of lawyers to be empathetic experts guiding people to great legal results. So I oversee our team that's grown reasonably rapidly, and we now have several lawyers working in this space in Victoria, and that's a little bit about us.
That sounds great, and it sounds like a really, I guess, a valuable place to start when you're looking for a law firm in terms of what might be able to fit for you. So if someone were looking at our website and looking at trying to find a personal injury lawyer, what would people expect from their first appointment if they were to come and see you?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And I remember starting my career and having my first client come to see me in her Sunday best, very nervous. Seeing a lawyer is something that we in the industry can really take for granted as being a simple process. But for people to have an understanding of what it's going to look like before they come in, I think is really helpful. So our lawyers have time allocated for every new client of at least 60 minutes. We would expect the appointment to go for that long, and sometimes, depending on what the person has been through, a little bit longer. That first appointment can be quite involved and something that people should be prepared for emotionally, to need to retell their story. There are situations when that is just too confronting, and we can work around that. But most of the time, the lawyer will take that time to understand what the person's been through, what their road trauma looks like, and how it's impacting them on a day-to-day level. They will then take the time to explain the TAC scheme in detail, with tailored advice to that person, so what you can access and what that looks like. If the lawyer thinks they can assist with a legal claim, they will then take the time to explain how we work, how we charge, and what working with us looks like. Okay. If we don't think we can assist, then we provide appropriate referrals if necessary and fact sheets, but the appointment would still usually take the 60 minutes to make sure that the person has a good understanding of what their entitlements are, even if we can't help. So that first appointment is obligation free, and the injured person will walk away with a good understanding of the TAC scheme, a good understanding of how the lawyer charges and works, and some documentation written in plain English to review and decide whether they want to proceed with a claim with us.
That's great, Meg. I guess what I find really reassuring is you're very aware about often the state of mind and the emotional well-being of people as they come, because what we know from a road trauma perspective at Amber Community is those People are often so overwhelmed by all the things that they have to deal with after they've been impacted by road trauma, particularly either if they've been seriously injured or lost a loved one. So having that sensitivity with a law firm, I think, is vital, and one of the reasons why Polaris is, certainly a firm that we chose to partner with, because that's vital for us when we're looking at how we can help our clients choose the right firms. So thank you for that. And can I clarify too, is that first appointment free?
It is. The first appointment is free, and that advice is given free with no obligation.
Okay, great. So going on from what you were saying about what your lawyers offer people in that first appointment, can you tell us a little bit about your staff and their experience with personal injury law? Because I guess one of the things that we find with clients is who are seeking counselling with us, they often aren't aware of the nuances between different types of law, and how valuable it is, I guess, to go and speak to a personal injury lawyer rather than someone who doesn't focus on personal injury. Having that expertise behind them, I think, is extremely valuable and often not something that people are very aware of.
We exclusively do personal injury, and our lawyers practice exclusively in that area. So we strongly believe that the lawyer down the road who drafts your will is probably great, but if they're doing one personal injury claim a year, they just don't have the experience to guide you through the process on a couple of fronts. They'll have to look up the law for everything in the same way that I wouldn't try and draft a will. There's also, and you touched on this earlier, there's also the emotional and psychological element. So with our staff, you know that when you sit down with a lawyer, this lawyer has worked in personal injury exclusively, and they're supported by a team of lawyers who have a huge volume of experience, and by a social worker who requires mandatory debriefing. So one of the things that I know that we bring to the table is that emotional awareness, and we can all learn the law back to front and become black letter lawyers, but being able to genuinely empathise with someone and what they're going through, even to the point where knowing what part of the story needs to be retold and what part doesn't. So we know that sometimes people want the space to talk about what they've been through, and they want to make sure the lawyer understands the full picture. Our lawyers have been doing this in this particular area for long enough to also be able to recognise when there is no need to drag them through that information again. And I think that's the real advantage of having specialist personal injury lawyers, is that yes, they know the law back to front, but you can also be very confident that you're not the first injured person that they're guiding through this process. So we've learned a lot along the journey, particularly about how to support our staff, and that mandatory debriefing is a newer introduction for us. But it's emotional work. We can't divorce the person from the legal case, which also means that the lawyer can't separate what has happened from the legal outcome. So we're really conscious of making sure that everyone has the support that they need to get through that process, really trying not to re-traumatise people by going through the legal process.
I think one of the things that really resonates for me from what you're saying about Polaris is the desire and the knowledge about trauma, and having a social worker on staff, I think, is a great start to help the lawyers work their way and navigate their way around that, because one of the things that we don't want for people who've been impacted is to be re-traumatised. And I think there's a lot of anxiety from clients who are first seeking out legal assistance about that, about how difficult the process is going to be, which I guess kind of leads me to my next question. You know, what is the process like for people when they, if you assess that they certainly have, sorry, my words have gone, that it could proceed, that you're happy to take them on as clients because you feel that you can offer them something. What would they expect in everything from medical appointments and assessments, those sorts of things?
I think the point about re-traumatisation is really important, and the statistics show us that the longer people spend in the compensation process, the worse their psychological outcomes are. So our aim at Polaris is to get you in and out as quickly as we can while also maximising your outcome. But we appreciate that while it might be great for lawyers to have a whole bunch of files sitting on the shelves, it's better for you to have your claim wrapped up as soon as possible. So we have file caps to ensure that if there's a delay in your claim, and there will be, there are inevitable things that slow claims down, but it won't be because our lawyers didn't have time to work on your file. The claim process, after that initial appointment, we then begin a process of gathering information. So it's really an investigative stage where we get previous clinical records, current clinical records, and we put together the story of you, told by you, but then backed up by medical information and financial documentation. We arrange for you to be assessed by medico-legal experts, and we do that in partnership with the TAC. So we will arrange the appointments and pick the doctors, and the TAC will fund those appointments and work with us to gather that medical evidence. Your injuries need to be stabilised before we can get to that step. So we do the investigation. In an ideal world, we're ready to then proceed with the medical appointments. If you're recovering from surgery, if the injury is recent, there can be a delay before those assessments take place. After we get the assessments in, the medical material is reviewed and the claim is lodged and progressed. Most claims resolve soon after that process. Some, there's a need to litigate or a need to have an informal dispute process with the TAC. And then in those situations, we proceed through that process. So claims take between 6 months to 2.5 years. If your claim is older than that or taking longer than that, something has happened, either an issue with your stability or a point of contention with the TAC. But we aim to have people in and out of the system within that 18-month period.
Okay, so is there any ideal time for people to contact? And you mentioned before about the medical assessments don't really happen until people are stabilised. Does that mean, for example, if someone suffered a serious injury, that they're at the point where they're the best they're going to be long term?
That's right. So stabilisation is when, obviously, humans change and we never know exactly, we don't have a crystal ball.
Of course.
But when you're unlikely to have a substantial change. That said, your initial question around the best time to contact a lawyer, waiting till you stabilise isn't necessarily the best decision. Everyone is in different circumstances and what they can emotionally take on at that time is relevant. But if you can speak to a lawyer before your injuries have stabilised, the lawyer can do that investigation in the background and be ready to go. It shouldn't be something else put on your plate while you're focusing on your rehabilitation and your recovery, but it's something that can be prepared so that we're ready to go once you've reached your maximum improvement.
I think that's great advice. I think I know you're exactly right. People have so much to deal with. If they can hand some of it over to the experts, I think it's certainly a really good strategy in order to try and manage everything else that they have to do. I guess going on to the final question is really about Like we said before, often people are so overwhelmed by everything that's happened in their life and the changes that they're facing and just dealing with their new reality. How do people choose the right lawyer for themselves? Because I think that what often happens for all of us in a variety of situations is, for example, we might go to a GP and stick with that person even though we might not be 100% comfortable, or another healthcare professional, or even people seeking counselling. With us, we'll often say to people, if it doesn't feel right, come and tell us and we'll find another counsellor. It doesn't happen very often because all our counsellors are amazing, but it's a thing, and it's a reality that you don't necessarily fit with everyone. So what would your advice be about how to choose?
I think that the parallels between choosing a personal injury lawyer and choosing a counsellor are really interesting. Similarly to you, I would say that all of our lawyers are amazing, but it does need to be the right fit. You do need to share your story and your medical records and a huge volume of private information with this person. And you also need to trust them at critical times in a claim. So you need to choose someone from the outset that you're confident is going to invest in your claim, you as an individual and also the legal result. And you want to be able to sit there at that first appointment and think to yourself, if they're telling me this is the most compensation I'm going to get, am I going to trust them? And am I going to trust that they've done everything they can to maximise it? So that rapport is just so important. And we can all go to the busiest, flashiest lawyer in town, but you want the person that you know is going to come on this journey and guide you through it. I also would say to people thinking about embarking on this journey to be upfront. It is a two-way relationship, and I think the older I get, the more I recognise that people sometimes feel like lawyers in a position of authority, but this does need to be a two-way relationship. So if you can communicate to the lawyer at the outset what your limits are, what you're going to be able to cope with, what you can't cope with, if you're not comfortable telling them that the first time you meet them, you might not be comfortable telling them that in 6, 12, 18 months when you're sitting at the door of court. You want to have a relationship with someone where you can be clear about what you can and can't handle and what a good outcome for you is. So focusing on that relationship building in the first appointment, and do you get the right vibe from them, is just as important with a lawyer as it is with all of the other people that you engage. I think it's easy for us to think that the lawyer should just be, a particular stereotypical lawyer way, but you're going to need to have a human relationship with them as well. So focusing on that rapport. Once you've checked, once you're confident that they know what they're doing and that they know personal injury, then it's about relationship building. And I would really recommend being clear from the outset with them if there's something that is daunting to you about this process. You don't need to suffer in silence and pretend that it's just another appointment for you. They will know that this is a difficult process, and you can communicate that early on.
I think it's spot on, really. I think, like you said, there are parallels between choosing a counsellor and that, I guess, intuition, that feel, that vibe is really important. Building that rapport is vital, certainly to the success of counselling, but also when we're choosing a person who's going to represent us in the best possible way. Is it okay for a person to bring like a family member or a support person with them to their first and subsequent appointments, I guess?
We encourage it.
Great.
So if you have someone who can be with you through the process and be a sounding board, sometimes we do our best to condense the information and give it to our clients in plain English, but it's still a lot to take on, and we provide easy to read fact sheets and do our best to make it digestible. But just having someone after the appointment that you can say, what did she say about this thing, can be really helpful. So you'd never get any pushback from us about bringing someone with you.
That's great, and you're right. And the plain English, I think, is vital, because clients will often talk to us about legal jargon, and that they really didn't understand what the conversation was about. So I think that having that written and also spoken to them in a way that we can all understand is so super important. Look, thank you so much for coming in today, making the time to talk with us. I think it's been invaluable, and I think it will be a really good opportunity for people to get a really lovely snapshot of what to expect, and a little bit about yourself and Polaris. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. We're in awe of the work you do, and really pleased to partner with you.
Thank you.